If you've been following for a while, you know I have a thing for old patterns. Last week I finished a blouse from 1869. There was a bunch of hand sewing, flat lining, the whole thing. And this week I'm jumping almost 100 years forward to 1958, the late 50s. Which raises a question that has been dancing in my brain. Does vintage count? Is a 50s suit actually wearable, or is it just a costume?
This is not a costume. This is not a costume. This is just how I would like to dress every day.
And this is the pattern. As you can see, it's illustrated in that gorgeous mid-century art style. Two colorways are shown, a red version and a beautiful orange plaid. Now, my fabric choice is completely different, but I'll show you that later. What we're looking at is a two-piece suit, a very fitted structured jacket with a nipped waist, a flat collar, front closure, and a matching pencil skirt. Very 50s, very Mad Men. Now, 50s patterns are very interesting to work with because their sizing is wildly different from modern sizes. So the first thing I always do is I measure the pattern pieces just to make sure. I'm a modern 36, which roughly maps to a vintage 40. So this should work, but we'll talk about fitting later. But here's my main concern with this pattern. The waist suppression on this pattern is extremely pronounced. 50 silhouette is all about the hourglass figure. So if your proportions differ from the pattern's built-in assumptions, you may have to tweak some of the features. I personally have somewhat of a wide rib cage, so I might have to tweak either the side seams or the back darts. We'll see. This pattern is from 1958, and I personally know people from 1958. It's not that long ago. So you would think that the whole overlapping pattern pieces would be done and over with. However, it seems like this is not a time thing. It's a European thing. Last time I used a hammer and I made tiny incisions on the paper that you see behind me. But I ended up heavily denting my table, and it's already in bad shape. I don't want to make it worse. So today we're going to use real pattern paper, which is basically just paper that's ever so slightly translucent, so we can actually see what's underneath. Smart technologia. One thing I like doing is using different colors of highlighters for different pattern pieces, because sometimes they use the same symbols for different pieces, and sometimes the trajectory is not even that far. In other words, it's not that hard to get your pieces mixed up. This is the fabric that I'm going to be using. It's very 60s in my opinion, which is why I chose it. I've had this fabric for about 3 years, and I think it's time to use it. Am I the only one who hates cutting? Unfortunately for me, there's more cutting to do. I gotta do the lining pieces now. Now, the pattern instructions call for a canvas fabric to go between the lining and the main. but my lining fabric is pretty heavy, so I'm just gonna skip that step. I also wanted to show you the main pattern piece because I found this pretty interesting. This is the center front, and this is the shape that I cut for the main fabric. And then it tells you to create a crease right here, fold this piece, and then this is the shape that you have to cut your lining fabric. This is a sort of reverse that I've never done, so I'm really excited to see how it turns out. Pattern instructions actually call for contrasting thread to transfer the markings, but I think I'm just going to use chalk. Happy to report that my first time doing princess seams was successful. That was very stressful. Once the front panels were assembled, it was time to sew the back darts. I had already transferred the markings, so I first practiced on the paper piece to get acquainted with the shape. This was by far the trickiest part of this project for two main reasons. Firstly, the lower edge of the piece was somewhat scalloped, so I needed to be very precise when placing the darts. And secondly, I chose the wrong fabric for this project, because it was very thin and flimsy, which meant that I had to quickly press each dart to set it in place. Last dart to be ironed, and I can confirm that it does get easier, but these darts are something, man. I think it has to do with the bottom edge, but yeah, I think they're turning out just fine. I finally feel like we're out of the woods. It's time to close the side seams and the shoulder seams. And maybe we'll do a first try on. First try on. Hopefully it's my size. This one seems okay. Let's try the other one. I can breathe again. Listen, diagnose me all you want. One thing that's never going to change about me is I don't like reading instructions. I don't. If you're someone who reads the instructions, props to you. You're an exceptional human being. You are. I don't know how you do it, but you are. So pat in the back to you. No pat in the back for the rest of us who don't read the instructions. But yeah. However, there's this one thing I do, which is I skim through the page. I recognize words and patterns, and my brain goes, got it. But you know what happens? Well, you don't know the instructions because you didn't read them, so you don't know them. Anyways, this leads me to tell you that I was completely wrong when I talked about canvas fabric. The pattern does mention canvas fabric, but you're not supposed to do the whole thing. You were just supposed to cut an interfacing piece of fabric. Yeah, which I was going to do anyways. I was like, I'm not doing the whole canvas thing, but I'm doing the interfacing. Turns out that's exactly what they want me to do. Girlies, read the instructions. I'm going to be using fusible interfacing for this because it's what I've got. The thing is, I've always had the hardest time using fusible interfacing. In fact, the real question is, why am I even bothering using this, knowing that I don't know how to use it? Just watch the video. Maybe that's the key. Maybe you're supposed to watch a video right before. Okay. It seems to be working, however, the corners are always the first spots to want to come off. So I'm going to try to give them a little bit more heat and apply more pressure. Let's see if that helps.
I feel like fusible interfacing is one of those contraptions that I purchased when I first started learning how to sew and hadn't had really bad experiences with due to my lack of experience. Because I didn't have much trouble with it this time.
Last night I ended up working until pretty dark and I made 2 colors. Number 1, number 2. The thing is, when I first thought of this project, I was very adamant that I wanted a white color because I thought it would be very girly and it would pop against the patterned fabric. But I've since changed my mind because I don't have the right type of fabric. This is a cotton and it just does not feel right against the other fabric. And on the other hand, I feel like for once I'm gonna go the simple route and do the normal thing. Yeah. I'm currently trying to pin the sleeve onto the armhole, and one thing I'll say about this pattern, and the same thing happened to me with the 1869 pattern, is that they provide markings that are pretty obvious and logical. I'll give you an example. They do provide the markings needed to assemble the front sleeve with the back sleeve, but then they don't provide the markings needed to correctly pin the armhole to the sleeve. In fact, it is one of the steps that I keep just completely failing again and again and again. So what I've started doing is pinning both sleeves at the same time and checking that the placement is correct and that they fall nicely. But I'm currently struggling with one of the sleeves, so let's see if I can get it right. Unfortunately for me, they're not perfectly lined up. Let's try again. Yesterday was a little bit chaotic, so I'm gonna show you the progress. First, I installed the martingale. And I think it turned out really pretty. This is the first time that I do something like this, and I really enjoyed it. It was really fun to make. The second thing I did was add bias tape to the collar to finish it, because the pattern called for folding the main fabric and sewing it by hand, but I just wanted to make sure that it looked nice and neat on the inside. I still had to hand sew the collar because I wanted to make sure that I included the lining underneath that bias tape. Finally, regarding the lining, I have extensively pinned all of the seams together, meaning my lining and my main piece are completely pinned one to the other on those seams. And really the next step is sewing those seams. But before I do that, I need to finish all of the seams. In fact, yesterday I ended up bag lining the sleeves, and as you can see, they're undone now. And that is because I made two mistakes. The first one is I kept the same length for the sleeves, both lining and main. And the result of that was that my seam was not showing because I folded it in and was attempting to hide it, but there was weird bulging going on. And the second mistake that I had made is that I serged all of my lining seams, which meant that they were just sticking out. I consequently went ahead and had a look at the pattern instructions, and they do call for hand stitching the whole lining to the main, so that's what I'm gonna do. Sometimes you just have to follow the pattern instructions. Yeah, not always, but sometimes. After a whole day of hand sewing, the jacket is almost complete. I still have to add the buttons and make the buttonholes, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It's ever so slightly small, but I think it's just a fitted type of look that I'm just not too used to. I'm gonna go with used to, yeah. I'm gonna start working on the skirt tonight. I'm thinking about doing just the rectangle method, just like in the old times, which basically entails having a certain width and shrinking that width with pleats. I think I'm gonna do waistband as well, because the jacket is pretty high-waisted, so I want the skirt to be just as high-waisted. Yeah, now that I think about it, I don't know if I like a waistband. I need a waistband. I knew from the start that a pencil skirt was not my style, which is why I decided to completely disregard the pattern on this one. I did have a look at the instructions and tried to replicate the methods with a new, different design. I've wondered quite a bit about whether I should change the design of the skirt, but I knew that if I didn't, I would never wear it. And one thing about me is I don't like to make things I won't wear. The thing is, I don't think that a pencil skirt is out of style or unwearable. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna have a major comeback pretty soon. But I feel like I'm already taking major risks by making a 50s jacket that's super 50s looking while being a very loose clothing type of girl. Just had the very clever idea of trying the skirt on, and it's way too big for me, like way too big for me. I also don't really like the way it falls. That's just one part of it. I dislike the waistband, which you might have noticed that I was hesitant about a waistband. Very happy with the pleats though. I think they add something to the skirt. I think I'm just gonna do side seams. Like I'm just gonna sew some shape into it and take advantage of those side seams to make it smaller. That way I don't really have to remove the waistband, and I can use it to finish the skirt. I can just flip it on the inside and finish the waistband that way. Yeah, anyways, I don't want to fall because it's, too long. Let's finish this project. much better. I still have to trim the side seams, press them open, and finish the waistline. Now, there is no waistband because I used the excess of fabric that I was going to use for the waistband and just turned it inside and turned it into interfacing. If you're ever in that kind of situation, I think this is a very clever way to change course if that's what you're looking for. I'm really enjoying this skirt now. I think we're going to see the full potential once I press the side seams. And I also purchased the buttons for the jacket. They're tiny, tiny black buttons. The thing is, I'm very, very afraid of messing up the buttonholes straight onto the jacket. So I think I'm going to practice on scrap fabric and interfacing just to make sure that I don't ruin the project. All right. The machine work turned out not to be a problem whatsoever. However, I did mess up the placement of the buttonholes, which really angered me at first. But then I wore the pieces together, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I just knew that I had made something very, very special. In fact, I was very surprised at just how much I enjoyed wearing this ensemble. I did not feel like I was wearing a costume, but what do you think? Would you wear this ensemble, or is it just a costume?